Welcome to today's WIN meeting on the subject of support the CLOVER workers, CLOVERS workers who are of course in South Africa. I mean, as a person that grew up aware of the regime in South Africa, it was a tremendous victory when apartheid was overcome. But of course, it hasn't been replaced by socialism. It's been replaced by neoliberalism with asset stripping and exploitation and massive suffering for the workers. We've got talking to us today Mametli Survey.
It's Mametli, yes.
Survey, right. Wasn't too far out, was I? So you've come along to talk to us about the struggles that the Clover workers are having. I'm just going to let David Hempson. David, do you want to say something before Mametli starts?
Roger, would you like to come in and mention?
Oh yes, sorry, just before you. Sorry, before you start, Mametli, Roger just wants to say something about WIN and other things. So, Roger, do you want to come in now, please?
Right, comrades. The Workers' International Network welcomes you to another meeting of militants and trade union activists from countries around the world to show solidarity with workers engaged in a crucial struggle. In our weekly meetings, we've given a platform to working people engaged on the front line of struggle worldwide, from the resistance to police racism in the USA, to the general strike against dictatorship in Belarus, to strikes of 250 million workers in combination with a full-scale insurrection of peasants in India, and in mass demonstrations of workers and youth in countless countries on every continent. And this is not the first solidarity meeting we've called for workers in South Africa in defense of their past proud heritage of struggle against the regime of apartheid and slavery, and in solidarity with their current resistance to the rampant official greed, corruption, and xenophobia, which threatens to soil the legacy of that tradition. As with every battle nowadays, the CLOVERS strike is not just a parochial local conflict. It represents a cause which straddles the continents. It combines resistance to redundancies and the threat of pauperism and destitution with practical international solidarity with the victims of oppression thousands of miles away in Palestine. It's yet another proof of the irrefutable necessity for a workers' international, a single worldwide party of that class which provides the labor that creates the wealth and now constitutes an overwhelming majority of the people on our planet, men, women, and youth. Unfortunately, we are not yet that international. All we can promise is to help publicize your story, learn from its lessons, and broadcast your appeal for moral, political, and material solidarity. We're confident that your battle can be won, but irrespective of the outcome, we invite you to play your part alongside the rest of us in building support for our common cause. Thank you, comrade.
Thanks very much for that, Roger. To make, I'm going to
just one quite important quick point. That is, well, first of all, Maletwe, we're so pleased to see you. Secondly, we're also quite pleased to have Newsroom Africa has asked us if they could record Maletwe's opening speech. And I think that will be carried certainly in South Africa, probably throughout Southern Africa, and probably internationally too. So I just wanted to mention that if any comrade has a real objection to this, maybe you would have to stand down or mention the fact just for the moment. But I hope you would understand that this is an important meeting and it has now international coverage.
Okay, Mametli.
Comrades, thank you very much for this opportunity, but most importantly, for your incredible amount of support that you have given all of us, your solidarity, which has been a great inspiration to us here to continue fighting. I think as many of you would have been aware, because of the support you've been giving, we are now into the third month of the strike in Clover. The strike is against the restructuring of the company, which entail, brutalization of, workers, because that's the only way really that one can, can describe what is happening. That if we were to allow what the company want to impose on the workers, will be rolled back to conditions of work that preceded the 1994 period when apartheid was brought to an end and the first Black democratic government was elected in the form of the ANC. There's a strike, at Clover, on and by itself, is really a culmination of a perfect storm of multiple crises of South African capitalism. Climate change, C-19 COVID, pandemic, deepening economic and climate crisis, I think, a crisis of neoliberal policy and restructuring of the economy and the working class in the past 27 years to reinforce what can only be described as the neo-colonial foundations of South African capitalism and its accumulation in a post-apartheid era, which unfortunately remains a system of a cheap migrant Black labor. The reason I'm saying that is that, you see, this dispute has its origin in the disputes that have developed in the past 5 years or so, when GIWUSA began to organize, Clover in 2014, and I think we got recognition around 2016. That's when this crisis was beginning. The company, that's when it began to raise what it called a project in silo, which is a project of restructuring, entailing factory closures, entailing, job losses, at least in its implications at the time, as it was very clear to us. But also, all the other austerity measures that I'll speak to in a matter of minutes, but I think to summarize with which, one of it entails a savage cuts on the conditions of the workers. The wages are supposed to be cut by 20%. Number of van assistants, that is, workers that drive with a driver to deliver the merchandise to retailers, used to be 2 in the lorry. Now they have been reduced to 1, which would mean that a worker, in addition to driving 7-8 hours, they would now have to be loading off the merchandise. The compressed working week, which would mean that they are going to be changing the working day from the current 9 hours to 12 hours working shift, 4 days of uninterrupted work, amongst others, as well as many other conditions that I think companies will be aware from the material that we have been producing and so on. But also I think that it's important, and I think maybe let me just say that the reason I'm saying is a culmination or a perfect storm of all these crises is that obviously COVID has played a role in terms of company driving to accelerate this, but also companies across the economy taking advantage of the paralysis that COVID has imposed on the workers' movement to carry out a brutal restructuring that you are seeing. On the other hand, COVID did not really cause a crisis that we are seeing in the economy, that we are seeing in the industry. Itself, it merely aggravated it at best, because you would recall that South African economy was already in a crisis. There was already a recession. The economy was, the country was already downgraded by the major credit rating agencies to junk status. And obviously this had been a factor. And what happened is that the COVID merely aggravated that. But one of the things that were part of the crisis as well is a deepening climate change crisis. We were certainly confronted with these restructurings in a context of a 5-year-long drought that affected companies like, Clover, which obviously depend on agriculture, and most, in particular, milk production in the agricultural sector, which were among those that were hit hard and hardest, I must say, by almost a half a decade drought that only ended last year. And you can say that this year is an exception because we have had an exceptional rain and so on. Internationally, we are talking about climate change, about the fact that we shouldn't reach an average. of 350 degrees, but 350 in terms of concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. But the reality is that in sub-Saharan Africa, we have exceeded many of that in many ways. And you'll see from the latest report that, in fact, the temperature here are rising at double the rate that we are seeing globally. So for us, climate change, climate crisis is here, is not the music of the future. And the implications are devastating for industries. And of course, as with all these other crises, the ruling class is determined to offload the burden of that crisis on the shoulders of the working class. And of course, in a situation where the economy has been, on a downward spiral, the assets been devalued. It has, in many ways, unleashed another wave of imperialist multinational corporate raiding, such as the one that we see in this case, where an Israeli-based central bottling company is raiding South Africa's biggest dairy manufacturer in a form of Clover, but it's not limited to Clover. We've seen the same thing with South African brewery. We've seen the same thing across many economies. And this comes against the background of the neoliberal restructuring of the economy and indeed of the working class in the past 27 years of the ANC rule, which began in earnestly with introduction of a neoliberal program called GIA when the ANC took power in 1994, or rather shortly after 1994 in 1996. Now, this has led to opening of trade and, of course, dismantling of all the protections of the local industries, and it has allowed this sort of raiding not only in the dairy and the food industry, but across the economy, as I've said. And this has had a devastating impact on many industries, including, of course, it was clothing and textile, which had been completely devastated, particularly by cheap imports from China, but also is a story of the whole of the manufacturing industries, and poultry industry being the latest victim with imports, particularly from Brazil and so on, which have led to losses of thousands of jobs in the economy. Now, this, comrades, is the state really of the situation here, and the impact on this crisis socially has been nothing short of an absolute catastrophe for the masses of the working class. We are talking at a time when poverty levels are in excess of half of the population. Unemployment is skyrocketing. I mean, barely 2 years ago, it had reached a shocking level of 11 million in a country of about 60 million. And of course, now we're told that it's more than 12.5 million, according to the latest figures. But we are certain that when the statistics for the previous quarter comes, it will be another continuation of job bloodbath on the industrial scale, because it's not just in Clover where thousands of workers are going to be losing their jobs. It's in SAB, it's in Heineken, it's in Petro SA, and many other industries across various sectors of the economy. Now, insofar as you are concerned, comrades, Clover for us is a moment where, as an organized labor movement, and certainly I'm speaking of GIWUSA, FAWU, and I think broadly of SAFTU, where we are saying that we are drawing the line, that it is where we are saying that we are going to stop the capitalist class on their cruel logic of making the working people to pay and offload the burden of the crisis of their system on their shoulders, at a great expense of the workers, of their families, of their communities, and of course of many rural towns that are built on a very fragile economic foundations. Towns like Lichtenberg, like Hebron, like Frankfurt, where Clover facilities have been the mainstays of the local economy, and their closures will have far-reaching impacts in terms of in terms of other downstream and upstream, industries. Like in Lichtenberg, the report that I've seen in the past weeks is that many workers and many farmers are also going to be closing farms because they simply don't have any entity that can absorb what milk they produce from their farms. Is only Clover, which has the biggest cheese factory in the whole of the African continent in that small town. And when it closes, obviously the impact are going to be very devastating to those farmers and so on. Now, we think that this strike in many ways, is a continuation really of the resistance that is taking place. Since it has come out of the black working class, obviously in a period, leading to the downfall of apartheid, but also in a post-apartheid period, because it is not that the black working class in particular has ever accepted the neoliberal restructuring of the ANC government, which was brought to power obviously against massive resistance against apartheid by the working class in this country, but which upon resuming power, with the support of the South African Communist Party, with the support of the biggest federation of workers in the country, Congress of South African Trade Unions, they nonetheless introduced this neoliberal restructuring in order to facilitate the investment by multinational corporations, which is not only fair to grow the economy, but in many ways have made a situation worse for many of the black working class communities, for many of the working class people, and that has obviously aggravated not only class inequalities, but in a country where class has always been, bound up with a racial question. It has also brought us back that some of the surveys that I've seen, and certainly by the one conducted by South African Institute of Race Relations, it was saying that races are more polarized today than they were in the post-1994 period. In the last elections, we've seen sections of the black working class actually shifting their votes, of the white working class, shifting their votes even to, more right-wing parties like Freedom Front, but also more and more, resurgence of racial tensions in the country is a reflection of that. But also the xenophobic, sentiments in the country, and as well as the violence that has been the feature, particularly of the past, 10, 12 years since the 2008, economic recession, is also part of this crisis and how it manifests itself in terms of the response from the working class, which being abandoned by its main organizations, particularly the South African Communist Party, which by remaining in the alliance with the ANC, it has taken responsibility for the macro management, for the management of the neoliberal macroeconomic policies of this government since 1994, and therefore responsible for the slaughter of the working class, economically, socially, but if you like, even literally, because what happened at Marikana was a bloody reckoning between the ANC that is determined to maintain the system that the black working class, of course, fought in a struggle against apartheid on the one hand, and of course the black working class that increasingly is finding its conditions more and more unbearable, more and more intolerable, and rose in revolt in Marikana against those conditions, but also against the tripartite alliance that has been the political architecture for the maintenance of this particular system in the post-1994 period. The bankruptcy of the ANC in responding to this crisis is evident in their failures to respond, not only when we've been calling clearly that the ANC, the only response that it can give to this is by, of course, nationalizing and nationalizing Clover. Also, of course, we've been calling for nationalization of SAB and other, big companies that we think their restructuring are going to have a devastating impact on the economy, on many working class people and their families who are dependent on these particular cooperations for their survival and for their jobs, is really a demonstration that this is a government that is incapable of providing solutions. And I think, let's be clear about it. It's not true that the ANC has not been intervening in the strike. The first thing that the ANC did when the dispute was declared was to send the police on the first day of the strike, when there's not been any report of violence. And we've seen this consistently on the part of the ANC as well. The ANC has also intervened in ensuring that this measure is given, a green light, when we have shown and presented evidence that part of the negotiations between Clover and Israel, and in this Israeli-based consortium, and of course, their biggest shareholder, Central Bottling Company, is based on a decimation of many local towns and losses of thousands of jobs that have since come to pass since this measure took place and so on. They've given go ahead, and you'll see from the reports, they have said that this is part of, the drive by the president, to get more investment. I think his target was I don't know how many trillion. I mean, I think it's over trillion that he targeted for investment in foreign direct investment in the next coming 5 years since he took over in the past years and so on. We think that the call for nationalization, comrades, is not just out of ideological dogma, as we're saying. Look, the reality is, as I said, a Clover crisis is not invented either by ourselves, but also is not an invention of a Clover management. Is itself a logical outcome of the crisis in the broader economy that we are seeing, the crisis of capitalism at all levels. And what this calls for is, of course, the transformation of the foundations of this economy. We are saying that Clover must be nationalized, but you can't just limit it only to Clover. We need to nationalize all the commanding houses of the economy so that we take the economy into public ownership, so that we can place the economy under a democratic control and management of the working class, so that we are able to plan the economy in the interest of the working class people, of the poor majority in this country. But more than that, we can be able to make sure that we, craft a path of sustainable development that can also begin to roll the ecological catastrophe of climate change. The way that we are going to bring about that, comrades, is beginning to build a movement that can provide an alternative. And it is clear that the ANC has run its full course. They've created this crisis by the policies that they've introduced in a post-1994 period, most of which was merely a continuation of the neoliberal policies that had been started by apartheid regime. And of course, all of those policies have culminated in this crisis at all levels of society. Even the gender-based violence, which has reached horrendous levels in this country, is a reflection of the crisis of the system and so on. The xenophobic violence that is in resurgence is, a reflection that this country is headed for a moment of decision, a colossal conflict between classes. There is no any other way of going ahead, because the reality is that the status quo cannot continue. It doesn't work for the overwhelming majority. The reaction is begin to scapegoat sections of the poor, the migrants, and because in reality, they have no solution to the crisis of their system. And by that, I mean all the mainstream political parties that have joined on the bandwagon of the recent xenophobic programs and so on. The only hope that we have is the workers' movement in this country, is the working class, and a program that we need to be able to put forward. And that is the reason that the workers' movement, we must not and we must never be afraid of our own political conclusions and their implications. And when this system is not working, we mustn't be afraid to call the crisis what it is, but also to put a bold solutions that we think will be able to work. Nationalization is the only logical conclusion to this, and we think that it must be important to point out that the state ownership on the basis of capitalism, which has collapsed many publicly owned companies like South African Airways, Eskom, that is the energy, utility, and many others across the, the public sector, is not solution, because all of that have been plundered by the black elite. They've been plundered, by the big established monopolies, and that's the reason that all of them are collapsing. That's the reason that you are saying that it's not just the public ownership, it is a public ownership on the basis of the democratic control and the management of the working class. And this is not a far-fetched solution. We are saying give those closing factories to workers and make sure that you capitalize them, you underwrite them in terms of the market, and let's see how efficient the workers will be able to run them. We are absolutely confident that workers will do far better jobs than the parasites that are the shareholders of Clover, than the corrupt management of Clover, which has given itself loans amounting to 170 million rand in the last year. Now they want workers to pay for that crisis and so on. So, comrades, we think that it is high time as well that SAF to act on its resolutions. The resolution to build a mass political party of the working class, to make sure that not only do we bring workers to provide leadership in this crisis, but we unite them with many working class communities that are in struggle, with young people that have been in open revolt in campuses across the country, fighting neoliberal attacks on public education and so on. But also growing number of activists that are fighting for migrant justice, for climate justice, and for against gender-based violence. All of these movements are a call for the working class to be united into a mighty stream of working class resistance. And how else to go about that than provide or put forward a program that can tie together all these knots and all these tributaries of working class struggles on the industrial planes, in the communities, in so-called service delivery protests, in campuses, in the climate, in migrant and gender justice movements, but also putting program for alternative, which for us is socialism, a simple idea that the working class, through nationalization of the commanding heights of the economy, it can place the vast resources of society at the disposal of the whole of society, and on the basis of democratic planning, make sure that we resolve the problems of unemployment, of housing, of climate change, of gender-based violence, all of these problems that are a class of the working class under capitalism. And we think that building such a party has never been more urgent, because this government and all parties that base themselves on this system have no solution. The only thing that they are going to do is to plunge this country into barbarism of xenophobia and all the civil wars that it will entail. Thank you very much.
Thanks. That was an absolutely superb speech. And I could see as you were talking, Mamatli, that people were cheering you on. If you look in the chat, you can see all the faces of solidarity and people clapping. That was absolutely fantastic. I'm just sorry. Instead of, we've got a good attendance, 47, we don't have 5,000 people listening to you, because that was absolutely brilliant. So there's lots of people, as I say, there's 47 people here. So I'm going to ask for contributions. Our people can keep it to about 5 minutes, and then we'll either ask Mamatli to respond in the meantime, or we'll ask him to sum up at the end. So if you could just pop your hands up. With there being a lot of you, I won't be able to see you too well unless you actually use the electronic hand. So if you can all say you can sit to about 5 minutes. Can we start with Steve, please?
I want to thank the contribution of Comrade Sabay for outlining the context of the struggle in South Africa as an international struggle, because this is not just about Clover, it's not just about South Africa, it's not just about Israel, and it's not just about the United States. It's a global struggle that working people are facing all over the world. And I think that we had an action on the 27th at the Israeli consulate in San Francisco around defending the Clover workers, demanding that the attacks on them be stopped, that it be nationalized, that workers run it. And we find it is the same situation and struggle in the United States. Privatization and union busting by the capitalists are intensifying. Outsourcing and privatization, contract labor, which is going on all over the world, really, is part of this process of increasing the drive to increase profits of the capitalists. And I think that the central thing now is in this fight is really building an international working class movement, because the United States, the longshoremen here, workers played a critical role in fighting the apartheid regime by blockading cargo from South Africa. They did the same in blockading Zim, the Israeli shipping line. We need to have united working class action. And we are going to reach out to the rest of the trade unions in the United States, and we have to reach out internationally to win this struggle. This struggle can be won by workers internationally. The product that shipped from Israel to South Africa, they plan Clover and the Wertheim family, is to think about this, is to actually bring product from Israel to South Africa, which when South Africa is a rich agricultural country, this is capitalism. This is capitalism, the destruction of the South African world economy and the working class. So I think that it is a matter of life and death. There is no future for the working class with the present system. That's very clear. And what had been hoped for in South Africa, which is that the democratic movement would lead to a future for South Africa without socialism, has shown to be a fraud. The president, Ramaphosa, not only was involved in the attack on the miners, but he himself is a capitalist. He has the franchise for McDonald's in South Africa, as the Wertheim family has the franchise for Coca-Cola. I mean, the control of the multinationals of the global economy and direct control of the governments of these countries for the purpose of increasing profits is a global problem. And I think we have to link up the struggle in the United States concretely. When we fight for the Clover workers, we're fighting for American workers who are facing mass unemployment, thousands and thousands of people homeless in San Francisco, one of the richest cities in the world. This is capitalism. This is what capitalism is doing. It's destroying the working class. So I urge all brothers and sisters, we need to build a united front internationally to take this struggle forward and bring a victory to the struggle of the Clover workers. We can do it, and we're behind you.
Thanks very much, Steve. Jabu.
Thank you, Comrade Mametwe, for such an eloquent report on what is happening. One of the things I remember when there was the apartheid came to an end, there was a big emphasis on the media in supporting the fact that we've now got a new Black middle class, which was now going to be the new trend in terms of the transition from apartheid to the new democratic South Africa. I was naturally worried about that because I have lived in England, and I knew that that wasn't going to bring the changes that the working class in South Africa had fought so hard for. And to my dismay, this is exactly what has happened. I was in South Africa a couple of months ago when there were local elections taking place on the grounds. And as Comrade Mametwe so eloquently outlined, how a lot of people are so disillusioned and that they are now voting for extreme parties and moving away from the ANC. The disillusionment was well-founded. You walk around South Africa, as much as when you're in England or the West, there's this whole emphasis on shoving the whole rhetoric of saying things have really changed in South Africa without you even being allowed to express an opinion. Things in South Africa have not changed in terms of how the working conditions are manifesting itself. Working class people are actually struggling. They are experiencing a deteriorating conditions. The economy is not favoring their plight. So I'm always, I felt goosebumps when I heard Mametwe speaking, because it really brought it home. Because you see the disdain, the whole attitude towards the poor. I remember being in a company of some of my family members as these children were begging in the street, and the whole rhetoric of sort of blaming these children who were struggling. And when I turned around and I said, and then who's blaming the politicians? Everyone went silent. There's the neoliberal agenda to actually blame the poor for the conditions that they are finding themselves in, and the exploitation of workers that has really, been intensified in terms of the outline of what the Clover workers are experiencing, the precarious conditions, the reducing of hours and manpower, and the increasing of, working hours at no remuneration. So I really recommend Mr. Mametwa's analysis, and also just to reiterate the other comrade who spoke after, to say it is a global problem. We are facing this. We've been up and down the country, challenging fire and rehire. Weetabix is doing the same thing in the UK. You've got various Royal Berkshire hospitals, the strikes, the Kingdom strikes. They've been on strike for almost a year, fighting for their wages and their conditions. So just to add my bit of 2 pence there, to say forward with the struggle. Amandla.
Thanks very much, Jabu. So I'm going to bring in, is it Taylor next?
Oh, Taole.
Totally right. Hello, welcome.
I think Comrades B have indicated something, highlighted something that is very important, because now, as the working class, now I was just saying, Comrades B have indicated something or highlighted something very important. As the working class, we are actually struggling. Now, to have a working class party, it will also assist us a lot, comrades. We are struggling under the current leadership, or under the current government. Now, the only answer to us as the working class and the unions is to have our own party. Now, I was just saying to comrades in this forum to say, can we pay attention to what the comrades have just alluded to, not just to end here. Can we just try to digest that as the leadership? Because now some of us, we don't have powers. We are just on the ground. We've got nothing. But if the leadership up there can take that up, I think it will assist us. What the comrade have just said of opening our own party as the working class party and the unions. SAFTU, I think, should also take it into account, the comrades. Please, it's a high time now that we are taking things seriously. We can't just complain and do nothing, and then also having the marches and then picketing and the like. We need to have something that will support us even after this strike of the Clover workers. Thanks, leadership.
Okay, thanks very much for that. That's brilliant. Ed, do you want to come in next?
It's really just a question for the comrades, because I mean, particularly Taoli, who just spoke, is emphasizing the need for a working class party. And I've tried to follow as much as I can the news from comrades in South Africa over the last 10 or 15 years, the efforts that have been made through the unions and so on to try and catalyze the formation of an independent party of the working class. We need this information in Britain too, this guidance as to how we go from protests, this is a fantastic meeting. I've been to many meetings where we have strike leaders talking to us, but to have a strike leader who's explicitly saying, that capitalism needs to be overthrown, we need democratic workers' control and management of industry, and so on, as part of the consciousness of the strike itself. For me, this is a very significant step because you can go to 100 strike meetings and you'll have very good inspired speeches about why these strikers need to win their issue, but to generalize it in the way that Mametwe has done so today is it represents a high level of consciousness in the trade union movement, probably higher than we have in the British trade union movement at the moment, which is just waking up after a long period of being unable to take steps forward. My question is, what experience can comrades pass on about the attempts to create a workers' party, the difficulties, and how those difficulties can be overcome?
Thanks very much for that, Ed. Right, I'll bring David Hempson in now.
Comrade, I'm so pleased and so encouraged, to hear the speech, a marvelous speech that Maletwe, has just given us. And it brings out clearly that this is a critical strike in South Africa's history, in South Africa's post-apartheid history. We've had terrible events in South Africa, such as the massacre of workers at Marikana. We've had other problems with the ANC government, which have ended up in violence against working people. But this is the first attempt, and it's getting an echo throughout the country, of mobilizing nationally and significantly also getting international support. Comrades, we should have really been all connected up before, so that we could actually show the strength of the working class internationally over a number of struggles. I was shoveling snow just a few minutes ago, and my wife was singing something to me to encourage me. And it's a song, I can see clearly now, and it's not just that they're blue skies. I can see all the obstacles in my way. We've got a map and we've got problems. To touch on the problems, which we've got to get out of the way in South Africa, can you believe political parties calling themselves radical transformation, going factory to factory, restaurant to restaurant, to try and kick out what they call foreign workers? Those are black workers who are part of the Southern African proletariat and have struggled to get a poor job like washing dishes in a restaurant. And now these thugs want to go around place to place, call themselves the liberators of the people, and abuse the very African people which they claim to represent. We've reached a nadir. This is a very low point in our history. And yet, at the same time, we have this bright point. We've got the united action among Clover workers. Remember, I wanted to put a picture up, I'll do that a bit later, of Clover workers on strike 50 years ago. I was in touch with them then, 50 years, it's hard to believe. And nothing really has changed in 50 years. Those are the magnificent workers on strike in the Durban strikes in 1973 and are on strike now. I just want to pay tribute to my Maletwe. I understand he's just come back from Lichtenburg. That's a small rural town. And you'll find that the white farmers also are actually going to be struggling now, because where they're going to sell their milk, they're being dumped. The whole towns are going to be moving into crisis. This strike is a strike of the working people in the broadest sense of the term, for the workers who are employed by Clover, and for the workers who are in cheese factories, processing factories, yogurt factories, all the rest of it. And now they're struggling for an existence. And we could even see that milk and cheese and other products by this company are going to be taken from Israel and dumped in South Africa. And this is no idle point. In South Africa, the chicken growing industry, the chicken farms have been going through crisis now because chicken parts are being sent from America and also from Brazil and dumped in South Africa. So that those massive chicken farms, which you can see in KwaZulu-Natal near my old house, are now being closed down. Hundreds of thousands of jobs are being lost. Those are black workers who are struggling for existence. And through this open economy, we're seeing decimation, as we're seeing now with MILCO. Now, I just want to move, I think we want to have further discussions about the Workers' Party, and let's see what we can say, but I want to move on to some practical stuff. Mamlet, I understand, is actually exhausted. I could see he was a little tired. Doesn't mean he's not going to speak well. You did a great job, comrade. But why? Because you're staying up all night, going out to these rural towns, organizing, and we're moving into a new stage in the strike, if I understand it, that there will be occupations to force that these small towns and small processing plants and so forth will not be closed down. And there'll be a demand for the machinery to be returned and for those plants to be recapitalized, or money to be made available so that they can become productive again. Why should our economy be wrecked by some corporate body which is going out to asset strip in a country which has got more than 12 million unemployed. So I'll put up later an appeal. I'd make an appeal, and I make it from the heart. We've got to support those workers. I've sent what I can at the moment, and I'm looking in my family to see what else we can send to the global workers. I'll put up the details there. And I'll also add one further point. The union itself is a marvelous union, but it's now approaching financial crisis because it's put everything into the struggle, and some of the officials may not be able to be paid at the end of this month or end of next month. So I think I'll put out a notice about this. Please contribute, and please see if your unions can contribute. The personal side's important, but it's even more important if you're in a teachers union, see what we could do with some of those who are well endowed and get the money through to South Africa. So this is going to be a stunning success for the working class in South Africa and a stunning example to capitalists internationally. We are not defeated. We are becoming united again. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks very much, David. Right, Abida, you're next.
Good evening, comrades. Thank you. My name is Abida. I'm a GIWUSA official in the Western Cape. I've just got a few short things. I think Comrade Sibaya has covered everything already, but I think what is also important for us to look at is the terminology that the employers were using, austerity. And if you think now, just in a few weeks from now in South Africa, we're going to have our budget, our annual budget, and we know that we're going to be faced again with austerity measures. This is just a continuation, as you can see now, even private capital, what the state has been doing with the public sector workers last year in terms of the increases, that we are continuously confronted with these struggles, not just in the private sector, not just in the public sector. If we bear in mind in South Africa, in a few weeks' time, tertiary education is opening again, and we're going to have the same struggles again that we are confronted with now on the shop floor for free tertiary education. So for us also here, what is important is that we need to be able, and we are recognizing that, but we need to mobilize even more for that working class unity and solidarity across the different sectors. It's not limited to what is happening to our members. And this strike at Clover is so important, because if the employers get this right, if they get away with this, this is what is going to happen to other sectors, whether it is NUMSA, whether it is chemical or whatever, because they are actually waiting and looking and seeing what is the outcome going to be of this. So it's the significance, it's way more than what we can actually comprehend, because other employers are looking, we're seeing that actually there's a wait and see approach from other employers to see what is going to happen at the Clover strike, who's going to be victorious. So it's really, really important for us to win the struggle. I also just wanted to say that it's amazing that the morale of our members, when they see the messages and the international solidarity, what that does for our members, if they see the little video clips, if we report to them, you know, that an individual or a union or whatever has sent, either whether it is financial support, which is very, very important for us to sustain this, or even just the other moral support, what it does to our members and their determination to see this through. I mean, we cannot even romanticize this. It's really difficult for our members. It's really difficult because most of them don't even have money to come to the picket anymore. So the employer think everything is okay because our members are not picketing outside. And that is important for us. And that, I think, it's very important also that we also, and the other part of the strike is the international solidarity and support for the Palestinians. And that we need to continue. Even if we win the strike at Clover, we need to continue with our work in terms of the solidarity work, in terms of supporting the BDS as well. Thank you, comrades.
Thanks, Abida. Just in case, I don't know if everybody's noticed, if anybody wants to make a contribution to the strike fund, David has posted the details in the chat. So have a look if you feel like making a contribution. So next, Ricardo, please.
Yes, greetings to everybody. I just want to, following up on Steve Seltzer's comments, we certainly did a couple of actions in the United States, and right here in the Bay Area, we have a small but lively protest. But Steve mentioned the international character of this strike. This also shows the bankruptcy of the American left. As for example, we made an appeal to every leftist group, every organization that considered itself, Marxist or reformist of any kind, that the response was not massive due to sectarianism that exists in the American left. The American left, in my opinion, I've been in some places around the world, is the worst left that exists in the planet. And if there would be a life in another planet, that would be in the universe. But anyways, I got a couple of questions to Comrade Matwell. In South Africa, there are some ostensible revolutionary organizations. What has been, the role of these groups in the, supporting the strike or leading the strike, intervening in the strike? Because, there are even organizations down there that proclaim to be Marxist or revolutionary. That's number one. And number two, a few years ago did emerge this organization in South Africa called the Economic Freedom Fighters, that they supposedly were, they proclaimed that they were to the left of the ANC, and supposedly they were going to bring some changes into the country. I met one of the sons of the leaders of this organization in the United Kingdom, and he was boasting about how the possibilities of this organization that would bring supposedly some sort of revolution. I was very skeptical then, and certainly now I am completely skeptical of the role, but I would like you to comment on that. Number three, I've seen in documentaries and stuff some the franchise members from the white working class arming themselves and saying that ANC government has brought poverty to the white population. And are these people, organizing in right-wing organizations? Are they posing any danger to the, workers, to the proletariat down there? Those are my questions. I would like you to comment. Thank you very much, Comrade, and victory for yourselves. And constructed. I hope that from this struggle is born a massive revolutionary Workers' Party with an internationalist perspective. Victory. Hasta la victoria siempre.
Thank you, Ricardo. You asked a number of questions there, which I think you're addressing to Mehmetli, but I think if we bring Carol Lang in next.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. In the call for support demonstration, the group that Steve and I belong to, the United Front Committee for Labor Party, had organized demonstrations in New York and in San Francisco and Los Angeles, because we are all profoundly inspired by the international struggle of the South African workers at Clover. When David was saying, I can see clearly now and I can see the obstacles. Well, the obstacles in the United States is a trade union leadership. Because I can't speak for the others. For Britain, I'm sure that they are an obstacle too, but the American Federation of Labor receives millions and millions of dollars from the American government. So to go off the course of supporting American imperialism, American foreign policy, we had supported in my union a resolution in support of the Palestinians, and the leadership went crazy, the Zionists went crazy. And so I was thinking about raising a resolution in support of the Clover workers in my union, but the idea that the Clover workers are so far ahead in supporting the Palestinians and understanding that this is an international struggle is just far and away from where the American labor movement is at this point. And so I'm going to do what I can to sort of raise it in where I can in my union, but it's it's hand in glove connected to American imperialism and American foreign policy. So this brings me to the point where it's obvious that we have to have a socialist leadership. The only thing that's going to advance the struggle of South African workers, Palestinian workers, American workers, everybody is breaking from capitalism, because it's capitalism that everybody, that the trade union leadership is striving to help get out of its crisis. And that means that there are thousands and thousands of layoffs or outsourcing. In the United States, jobs are going everywhere else and people are being laid off. And when you have that kind of lowering of the standard of living and people being thrown into poverty, very often all of the racist and homophobic and all of those attitudes that existed and were at bay at one point are starting to become the norm in the United States. And so racism and sexism and all of that is not among the workers so much, but among the lower middle class and middle class is becoming the language of this new movement, which I think will become a fascist movement at some point if things don't change around relatively soon. This is the language of the MAGA, the Make America Great Again, the whole, fascist mentality. And so the working class has to break from this hold that capitalism has on it and understand that our liberation comes through the liberation of the working class internationally. And so wherever I can, I will bring this up and attempt to, support the Clover workers who are breaking with the ANC and breaking with capitalism. So I have a couple of questions also. I'm wondering about NUMSA and SAFTU. Are they going to organize strikes in support of the South African workers? Because if they do, that could shut the country down and could be a meaningful step towards changing the whole character of the conflict. And so I'm wondering where they stand and what we should expect from them.
Right, thanks, Carol. Okay, that's quite a few questions. Rebecca, should we go back to you and give you opportunity to answer some of these questions? Was that you again, Carol?
No, it was Nomvume Kgalagala, the first deputy president of SAFTU. I just wanted to answer on behalf of SAFTU.
Fine, yeah,
Good.
yeah, go ahead.
Good afternoon, comrades, and I'm happy to be part of this gathering. I'm originally from the Western Cape in Cape Town. I just want to answer the question that refers to SAFTU and NUMSA. Yes, as SAFTU, we took that decisions. We met with the leadership of both GIWUSA and FAWU to make sure that all our affiliates are supporting the strike, because we have noticed that the strike have taken long and now SAFTU has not been up in the forefront. Now, SAFTU NOBs met today, and we are so grateful that the GS of SAFTU has proposed that we meet on the 3rd of March, all our affiliates, all SAFTU affiliates. I will also be present in Johannesburg. We will meet physically to make sure how do we strengthen the strike. So surely SAFTU, I just want to emphasize the fact that SAFTU supports the strike in full. So obviously NUMSA is part of SAFTU. They are affiliates of SAFTU. But we have taken that decision that on the 3rd, we will meet and strategize that all our affiliates must be upfront, because that's the decision that we took in the last Central Committee of SAFTU, when NUMSA was also faced with the same situation. Now, again, we are saying we are taking forward the struggle that FAWU and GIWUSA are confronted with. So rest assured that SAFTU is on board and is going to make sure that the strike succeeds. Thank you.
Oh, that's great. Thanks very much for that. Oh, but Mametli, do you want to come back as well with any responses to some of the last few things the comrades have said?
Yes, just brief points. I mean, firstly about the issue of comrades are asking Ronnie Castro. Ronnie Castro, I mean, was supporting us because we had a strike last year, and you know, we were accused of, no, actually it wasn't us. BDS was attacked for being anti-Semitic over a poster that we developed. You know, these organizations, I don't know who they were, in one of these right-wing Zionist newspapers in the country. And I know that they accused them of being anti-Semitic for using the picture, which in the country is of, you know, a very fat boss, you know, who is eating a lot, you know, enjoying wealth when everybody is starving. You know what I mean? Like everybody's. So they said that is how the right wing in Europe are using that to caricature Jewish people and all of that, and then that's how BDS, it clearly shows that they are being anti-Semitic. So they use that, and I think I know that, you know, he released a statement and all of that. So he is part of BDS. I know that they've been supporting the struggle, and I know that he's certainly still with us. About revolutionary left parties, yes, we, you know, my party is Workers and Socialist Party. We've been very much involved in terms of supporting the struggle. I know that others as well. There's Keep Left, which is affiliated with SWP in UK. There is Marxist Workers Party. I see Comrade Weisman is here. You know, they've also been supporting us. Most of these organizations are small. Of course, what comrades were asking, you know, is about the EFF, the Economic Freedom Fighters, which is sort of biggest, you know, radical speaking, if you like, parties, which, but fundamentally is a very bourgeois political party. And I think it has revealed its colors, you know, its reactionary character, particularly in the past weeks, in addition, of course, to all the scandals of them, you know, being part of the looting of the public resources, particularly since they entered the coalitions with a neoliberal white, you know, party, traditionally white party in this country. And they've now, you know, been part of the xenophobic mobilizations that are taking place. So at the same time, they've refused to support workers, except that they are grassroots activists where the factories are locating instinctively have orientated towards supporting the workers. So you have those elements in the situation. Now, of course, we have received the support from the Namibian miners. I, for one, when they released Appeal for Solidarity, I forwarded the document, their appeal to SAFTU, and asked and requested that SAFTU support them. And we also see how we can be able to link and support them actively. And of course, part of the problems, and I'm going to speak to that, is that at the moment, technically, we are not affiliated to SAFTU due to subscriptions. So it's very difficult, but I mean, the Deputy President is here, and I think he has spoken. I know that there are problems of capacity in SAFTU, but there is that certainly a commitment to support many of the struggle. I mean, the question of Palestine, you know, comes out of the resolutions of SAFTU itself. The last Central Committee meeting I attended, we underlined the significance of giving a concrete meaning to our internationalism as a federation. And there were two key areas that we identified as areas of campaigning. It was issue of Palestine, and that you know, Clover should be able to, you know, that GIWUSA should be able to take that and FAWU because of, you know, the situation in Clover, and the issue of Zimbabwe, where I know that our comrades in NUMSA have been leading. Obviously, there are other campaigns. These were the two campaigns that we have identified ever since the issue of Namibia and others. And as I said, maybe and perhaps the Deputy President of SAFTU is best positioned. Safe to say that they have given us a support, and I do think we should find ways in which we can be able to link with them and return that solidarity, because solidarity is not one way, you know. We're not talking charity here. We think that will only win on the basis of international solidarity, because our power lies in our ability to organize, not just only in this country. I mean, the fact that at the core of this is a very, cooperation and imperialism that, is at the center of the Palestinian question shows that link. And I think we have taken that up ourselves. But also the issues of factory closures, of job losses, of restructuring of workers' conditions is an international phenomenon. It's not, isolated to South Africa. It's part of the class of capitalism that is worldwide, is global in character, and we see this onslaught against workers, against the workers' movement everywhere across the globe, from Europe, Asia, America, US, Latin America, all of that, and being part of the international ourselves. We get reports of what's happening, and we try to, link up with the struggles. And of course, what is going to be more important is comrades who bases themselves on the workers' movement, on the working class struggle, but also cherish the idea that I think, it's higher time that we go beyond, this system, which is a system of a crisis. Even if you were to win reforms today, we know that, those reforms will be under attack immediately and as soon as you win them. And I think the only solution is ending the system. And I think the only way that we can end this system is organizing ourselves, not just on the basis of fighting organizations on the industrial plane, in the community, in civics, and all of that is important because all of that is about building a working class power, but also consciously putting a political alternative, programming the struggles, but also put the idea of a socialist alternative, but also we take concrete steps in putting in place an apparatus organizationally that can be able to advance that program. And for us, that is a mass political party of the working class, both in this country, but also at the international level, because the collapse of mass workers internationals is also part of this problem and what emboldened the capitalist class to go into offensive in the way that they've been going.
Mehmetli, can I just stop you a minute? We've got some more hands going up. Can I take some more contributions and then we'll come back to you? Because we'll give you some time to sum up at the end. Yeah, it's just a matter of small questions. I want to give everybody a chance to come in if they want and raise any further issues, and also anybody that wants to comment on anything that's been said. EOCA office.
My name's Tim Murphy. I'm with the East Oxford Community Association. I'm in Oxford. I just want to tell you about a few things going on in the UK and link those in. This situation with Boris, where he's been caught having all these parties, ignoring all the COVID rules with his staff there, having a special fridge at number 10 where they can hide the alcohol and bringing it in suitcases and partying all through the lockdown when other people were not even allowed to attend their relatives' funerals or attend dying relatives, that sort of thing. Well, that's just a tip of the iceberg of the corruption that's going on with the Tories. The police have now weighed in and shut down the civil service investigation, redacted it. So what we've got is total corruption. I mean, the amount of things that are going on with the parties, that's trivial. What's really happening is they're looting billions and billions and billions from the COVID funds, from any kind of business activity that they can. The Tory MPs are totally corrupt. They're taking all kinds of second jobs in institutions, multinationals, all kinds of things are going on. What Boris's response to this demand that he step down from breaking the law in the way that he has, more fascism, more creepy fascism, throw a load of right-wing ideas out there, say to his MPs, support me, and I'll give you all this more right-wing stuff. We'll clamp down on the benefits people. Even though they're clamped down on, to nth degree already, we'll clamp down on this, we'll do this, we'll clamp down on, human rights, blah, 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 blah. So what we've got is creeping fascism. In Oxford, we've got the Labour Party in power. In Oxford, there are no Conservative councillors because they're all in the Labour Party. The Conservative councillors in Oxford, the class war in Oxford is not fought between the ruling class and the workers' movement. It's fought inside the Labour Party, inside the trade unions. That's where the class war is fought. I mean, we've also got apartheid in Oxford. We've got a racial apartheid. We've got certain councillors, mainly from the Indian subcontinent. It's just like South Africa. We've got the whites at the top, then the Indians, then or the subcontinent people, and then various grades of Eastern European, and then further down we have the black people who do the dirty work and clean the kitchens and things like that. Right? Okay. And we've got the refugees now in significant numbers. We've got a really unequal society. We've got people living in luxury and wealth, and people on the streets wandering around in distressed cases of mentally ill people not getting proper treatment, homeless people. It's just like San Francisco or South Africa. It's not as bad, but it's very serious, right? Okay. And then it seems to me that apartheid isn't just happening in South Africa or the reintroduction of apartheid and Palestine. It's global. It's getting everywhere. Yeah, that kind of ideology, that kind of racial hierarchy. So that's the bad news. But the good news, during the corona, we had some political activism, as you'll remember, with the Black Lives Matter, and that carried on. It didn't just stop. Young people got together with all the other progressive organizations, and we had a big march and a big series of rallies called the Unity Marches. Yeah, and in those marches, people came together from all communities, and there was a small group of young Muslim women who've set up a little network to support each other, because some of them were feeling very isolated and suicidal and things like that. And they set up this little thing, and they eventually got hold of a Zoom account, and they built this group up, and they said they want to do something. And we told them about this march, and a few of them came on the march, and they brought a Palestinian girl with them. And this meeting was held on a Saturday, and the local the local Palestinian solidarity group, they decided, well, they wouldn't attend this march because they've got a virtual protest on the same day. And only a handful of young Palestinians came, and they were very inexperienced. They were all school children, basically, young students. And they came, and they had a flag, but they didn't have a pole. So we showed them how to stick the flag on a pole and stand in the right way where they'd be. And this young woman gave an amazing speech, an 18-year-old Palestinian girl. And as a result of that, that young Muslim women's group has now grown to 200 people who set up a charitable organization. They work with the local young Palestinians and with the local young Muslims and other groups, and they do refugee support work. Yeah, and so the young people, they're where the hope is. They're linking together. They are totally aware of all the things that people have been speaking about this evening. Possibly they're not as wised up on the trade union front, and that's where we have to contribute to them. Those of us who are older, have had trade union experience. But on every other topic, they're well briefed and they understand. So I think there are a lot of bad things coming down the pipe. There are a lot of there is creeping fascism. In fact, it's not creeping now; it's running. Yeah. But the counterbalance is the young. Many of them are developing a new level of global political consciousness. Thank you, comrade.
Well, thank you very much for that. Steve Zeltzer.
I think that the political vacuum, and there exists a major political vacuum in the United States and internationally, is that there is no mass working class party. In the United States, you have the Democrats and Republicans, and the unions do not want, the union leadership don't want a labor party. They give millions and millions of dollars to the Democrats and not to workers who are in struggle. I mean, the unions are very wealthy in the United States. They have billions of dollars, and they won't mobilize in strikes. There's a minor strike that's going on right now in the United States over 9 months. There's no national mobilization by the unions to support these miners in Alabama. But that doesn't mean that workers aren't fighting back, Amazon workers and others. So there's been a growth of strikes. But I think one thing that we see is a need for united fronts. We need a united front of the working class to support the Clover workers. Whatever differences there are in the working class, we need a united front internationally to mobilize the working class to win the struggle of the Clover workers, because that would be a victory for the South African working class and the world working class. We need a united front against fascism, the rise of fascism, xenophobia, and racism, where we have to unite working class organizations. And of course, we need a united front for a mass workers' labor party. The question in South Africa is that the ANC, I know the South African Communist Party says they support this strike. There has to be a fight for the ANC to basically demand that they break this takeover. It's an illegal takeover. They lied. They violated their takeover. And it has to be stopped. And I don't think it's going to be stopped by the government changing it, because the government is tied to international capital. I mean, the ANC is a part of the WTO, and when Momoe was talking about the destruction of the working class of South Africa, I was in Cape Town, where workers had been destroyed as a result of the flood of textiles from China. And workers were talking, we showed a movie called The Take about Argentinian workers occupying factories to defend their jobs. That is the situation for workers. They have to take over the factories, but there needs to be a political party of the working class that backs them up, that makes that a political issue in the entire working class. So we don't have a situation as we do in the United States of just the Democrats and Republicans. There is no working class political alternative. And so the construction of a mass workers' party is critical. The other thing is we need to organize in our unions, all the trade union movement in the United States and internationally, to back this strike. The unions worldwide have tremendous power if it's used, but it hasn't been used because, in my view, the trade union bureaucracy does not want to tie all the workers together globally. We need global strikes, which haven't taken place, of workers at General Motors, same multinationals. We face the same bosses internationally. So this requires a rebuilding of the world working class movement. And I think this Clover struggle and the appeal for international solidarity by the Clover workers, GIWUSA and FAWU, can be an important role in building internationalism with Korean workers, with workers around the world. There's great potential. And communication, the fact that we're able to have this discussion right now with our brothers and sisters from Africa, from Latin America, from around the world, that's very powerful. And we have to use this tool, as many groups are doing. This is the first time that we've been able to have international struggles of workers, direct workers to workers, to link up these struggles. That is the only solution to build an international working class movement. And I think that when we leave this discussion, let's work in our unions, our trades councils, our national unions, to get support for the Clover workers, to fully fund them, and to demand an end to this union busting. Now, Israel is an agent of the United States. They operate with the United States internationally. And the attack on the South African workers is not new, because the Zionists in Israel supported the apartheid regime. The Histadrut, the Israeli Trade Union Federation, was involved in supporting militarily the apartheid regime. So this history is now continued by the Zionists in their attack on the South African working class. And we need to draw those lessons around the role of Zionism and the freedom of the Palestinian people. And that's what we are doing, and that's what this strike is really bringing together on a global level. So let's build it up and develop it. And I think we can make a real inroad to build internationalism in the course of fighting for the brothers and sisters at Clover.
Right, thanks, Steve. Yes, but that's brilliant. Okay, David Hempson, do you want to come in next?
Comrades, I do think we should note the apologies that we sent. I put on a lot of pressure on Ronnie Casrils to come and speak, and do more than speak, but to bring the odd 100,000 members of the Communist Party with him and enforce. Well, as we know, the Communist Party supports two stages, and I don't know what stage we're in now, but it's we seem to have taken to the wilderness rather than to any next stage. But I just do want to mention that, because he will make a statement. He will do more than a statement if I talk to him again. He is somebody who will move on this question. He also promised the support of the BDP, in other words, the boycott action internationally and from South Africa. And that's a formidable force in South Africa. And we'd like to see more of their support, in this action, and particularly when it comes to financial support, because every struggle is a financial struggle. Those are the sinews of war, and we need that stuff. And then I also want to mention Joseph Dube, that is a leader of the Durban dock workers. He's struggling to come on stream, he says. And there's a worker right now on pier number 1 working the night shift, and he sends greetings and solidarity statement from the workers on pier number 1 in Durban, working right now. So this is quite concrete. We are in touch with the working class in South Africa, and we hope that network's going to work. Any comrade from South Africa who's not spoken, please know The door is wide open. Please do speak. I'm so glad we've had various speakers. We're an open forum and we want to hear from workers directly. Just briefly on EFF, the Economic Freedom Fighters. It sounds marvelous. It sounds radical, but these are the radicalism at the moment is going around to restaurants, to workplaces, to factories, and trying to get Black workers expelled because they're not statutorily South Africans. Now, if you know the history of colonialism in South Africa, every part of the region was forced into labor in South Africa to produce the amazing wealth that we've seen, you know, in the suburbs of South Africa. That came from the sweat and hard work of workers. At one time, there were 80% of the workers on the gold mines were from Southern Africa and not from South Africa. We know that was used to undercut the workers, but those are our people. Those are our workers. If they are being underpaid and low paid, that's our struggle to organize, not to hound them out. But that is the EFF slogan. They're against Black workers who are not South Africans. Unbelievable stuff. People talk that and say they're Pan-Africanists and deny it in every single action that they take. So we have a complicated politics in South Africa where to be radical is actually to be a Trumpite, to be able to speak as a Black person, to say everything that Trump says, but say, well, that's for our country. And that's a disgusting process, an obstacle in our way, which we've got to clear away. The working class is open-minded. It wants to include all people who are producing in South Africa and internationally as part of the working class. We'll fight as an injury to one is an injury to all, and we'll unite the working people. We'll unite all the people of South Africa. We know we can do it. It's there, but it has to be acted on. And we've got to get rid of the scum which we have called political leadership, which is trying to appropriate the workers, divide us, and even right now attacking workers in Durban right now. I've just had a message now on the WhatsApp, sending the army through. Those people are acting against shack workers in Durban who are rising up and trying to build a life for themselves and sending the army against them. And that's the local radical nationalists in Durban. So we want to get rid of this element. Even white people will actually find this disgusting. So we unite the people around the working class slogans. Through socialism, we provide plenty, we provide for the needs of people, and we are not a people of want. Thanks.
Thanks, David. But I'm going to bring Ricardo in yet, but like David says, you know, if we have got any South African workers here that want to say something, your contribution is absolutely invaluable to us because you're actually there and you actually know what's going on. So please, you don't have to talk for 10 minutes. Just a brief report or just say hello really would be great, I think. Okay, Ricardo.
Yeah, it's a very important one, Steve said, in terms of, you know, these kinds of meetings, gathering people from all over the world and being touching struggles that are happening around the world. Actually, due to a meeting like this, the Prensa Obrera, the journal of the Workers' Party, Partido Obrero in Argentina, published a nice article in Spanish about the Clover strike. You know, and they titled it South Africa, huge strike in Clover company. So bravo for that. And actually tomorrow there's gonna be in Buenos Aires a rally against the agreement that the Argentinian government made with the IMF to pay, you know, to give money to the international banks and pay the debt that the imperialists imposed on the Argentinian workers. And this is one mobilization in less than a week. Actually, this is the second mobilization for the same purpose in less than a week. On Thursday, they had a multitudinarian mobilization against the IMF agreement. And in December, they had mobilization that put more than 100,000 people at the Plaza de Mayo. So, the left over there is doing a great job organizing an independent gathering of leftist organizations that have been fighting back. Yeah, so that's one thing. Some people have been mentioning Ronnie Castrios as a possible leader of, even somebody wrote in the chat mentioning Ronnie Castrios as a possible leader for a Workers' Party. But my question is, how can you trust somebody that was part of the ANC government, and actually he was the deputy minister of defense under Joe Modise, a very corrupt man. And one of the first things that happened, as far as I know, when the ANC government was elected to office, replacing the apartheid politicians, Ronnie Castrios was, the ANC government through repression against workers in the transport sector that went on strike right at the beginning of the ANC government. And Castrios was part of that government. Actually, as far as I know, you correct me if I'm wrong, in that strike, the army was mobilized against the transport workers. I think that happened a few months after the first ANC government took office. And, how can you trust a man that led, an intelligence agency of the capitalist South African state? So I think that somebody with that background, no matter which stance he takes, is not a person that the working class should trust, should, even put hopes in leadership. That would, I think that's counterproductive. No matter if, if that person is a member of the, or was a member of the communist parties. I mean, there has been communist parties in the world that have been part of the Popular Front governments, and they have been complice in the crimes against the working class. The examples are there in France, in Spain, and now in Spain there are two ministers in the cabinet right now. So I mean, I think that the leadership for mass workers' party should come from the industrial or salaried workers that don't have a past like that. That being part of the repressive apparatus of the government, I don't think somebody that has been in the leadership of that, elbowing, being like, as for example, the first ANC government had generals that were involved in the war against the MPLA in Angola, against the Cuban forces that were fighting the racist South African army. So the new ANC government, when they came, to take over the defense minister, both Modise and Castrios, they rubbed shoulders with a sinister general called George Heering, who was the chief of staff of the South African army, which had blood in his hands. So I think that, through a grassroots workers' party should have a Marxist-Leninist program, and it cannot have leadership that have been compromised in, in being part of, government agencies that are repressive. That's my statement. Thank you.
Thanks, Ricardo. Right, there's no more hands now, so I'm proposing to now ask Mehmetli if you like 15 minutes to sum up and finish off what he was saying, and then we'll give Roger a few minutes and try and finish the meeting for 6 o'clock. Is that acceptable? Yeah. Well, I'll read it out. Comrades community says, good evening, comrades. I'm the shop stew from South Africa in the province of KZN. I'm not sure what that is. Port Shepstone, to be precise. As workers, we're being undermined and exploited by the employer, Clover SA, where you have heard salaries cut by 20%. So that's the report from Mavelo. Thank you very much for that, Mavelo. And thanks for pointing it out, Jabu. I didn't see that. Okay, shall we, Mehmetli, do you want to sort of sum up till about 5-2? Will that give you time to draw things together and make any extra points? And it's all right, Callistus, we've seen it. Do you want to come in now or not, Callistus?
He's also sent a sorry, comrade.
I've seen it, yeah. I'm just trying again to see that. We'll assume you're not coming in. Thanks for that, for the message, Callista, so you can obviously hear us. Thank you for responding. Right, Mometli, do you want to speak till about 5 to 6, then I'll bring Roger back in.
Yes, thank you very much again, and I think for brilliant interventions from many comrades, as well as reaffirmation of solidarity. And I think that is a message that I'm going to be taking to the striking Clover workers. Some of the shop stewards are here, but I think, you know, your support and everything that you have said here must not be underestimated in its significance in terms of just inspiring us to keep us, you know, fighting, as I've said. I think, comrades, we're all recognizing that a Clover strike is an important historic moment. My sense is that, at least in a short term, this is one struggle that will determine whether we're moving forward and backward in many ways, because I do not see, at least coming out of the leadership of the organized labor movement, an opportunity anytime soon where we can sharply draw the line, and as we have done, and I think put everything in the struggle to say that here and no further, insofar as attacks against the workers, factory closures, retrenchments, and all of that, but also the collaboration, you know, of the ANC government with imperialism, because, you know, as we always say that, you know, a foreign policy of any government is an application at the international plane of the domestic policy of that government. For government that has betrayed the working class majority in this country, who lifted it to power at enormous sacrifice, which has drowned in blood the mine workers who put it to power in a struggle against apartheid, at the behest of mining corporations in Marikana in the most bloodiest fashion that they did, cannot but, of course, you know, capitulate and sell out the Palestinian, you know, people in a way that once you begin to allow a company, you know, an imperialism whose colonial policies you say you do not approve, you oppose, to start taking over your key industries like food supply, what else are you thinking than to planning an alibi for betrayal? Because in future you're going to be telling us, when we demand accountability, that we can't be biting the hand that feed us, isn't it? You know, that when we depend on Israeli imperialism for food, who else would agree that we should be struggling against people like that who can simply switch or turn, you know, the taps insofar as food supply, and we find ourselves in a situation wherein people are starving. So we think that this is an important escalation in the, you know, policy of collaboration, where until now the ANC disguised it, at least rhetorically, they've stood on the side of Palestinian people. I think they are preparing, you know, for an all-out, unashamed, and not so subtle collaboration. I think in the, you know, in the way that they are carrying on. Now, the issue here, comrades, is that this struggle is also significant in many ways. You see, if you look at the policy, I mean, what has been happening until now, and what has been happening recently, what is very clear is that the capitalist class are now going after the heavy battalion of the working class, workers in permanent employment, in big factories, who until now they've not attacked, they have always attacked them, but not in the same way that they've gone after them. You know, in ESCOM, in SAA, now in Clover, in Petro SA, in SAB, and all of that. The restructurings in the past decades and so on have mainly been targeting at the marginalized sections of the working class. I mean, you know, workers in outsourced services, in precarious forms of employment. And I think what is very evident is that they've cut those to the bone, that there's barely anything that they could do worse to them and so on. And I think to open outlets for more profitable investment, they are carrying out the most brutal restructuring against those sections of the working class that until now have not been, you know, restructured in a way that we are seeing it. And the danger of that is that these are the workers that have now, until now, provided a stable membership, a stable for an increasingly diminishing membership of the trade union movement. If these are decimated, if these are reduced and cast to the same conditions that we have seen, among the precarious workers. This would be a qualitative escalation in the war against the organized labor movement itself and in the weakening of the organized labor movement, which is the only social force that can really lift us out of this crisis of capitalism and all the possibilities of an alternative, socialist alternative, political alternative to the crisis of capitalism and its institutions and so on, lies on that. We cannot allow this to happen. And that's the reason that we've got to draw the line. We've got to throw every resource, every effort at our disposal in this struggle. Because if we can be able to turn the tide, I mean, even if we can hold the Clover management and the capitalist class on its track in the west of what they are proposing for Clover workers, that would be an important milestone. Because at the moment, the struggle of Clover has focused attention of all classes in society. It has ceased to be just a dispute between an employer that is Clover and their shareholders and Clover work. It has become a major episode in a struggle, in the working class struggle in this country, with far-reaching consequences. And I think what outcome comes out of this struggle will be a benchmark against which all classes will be measuring what they are doing everywhere else. I don't think that if we defeat the job losses, if we defeat factory closures, if we force government to intervene in a way that we want them to intervene, to nationalize, to expropriate Clover factories and hand them to workers, we do not think that if we can be able to achieve that, any other section of the working class, at least the heavy battalions of it, would agree to job losses and the kind of restructurings for which until now everybody thinks there's no alternative. The crashing economy is a calamity over which nobody has a solution. That's the reason this struggle is very significant. And I think so is the alternative. We mustn't read into what the EFF is doing to think that it's just the maverick politics of Malema. The reality, comrades, is that what the EFF is doing, it is the logical conclusions that any bourgeois politician can draw in this situation. Because there is no any other way that you can manage capitalism other than by means, in the period of the crisis, like this one, other than by means of the brutal austerity that government, that the private corporations are unleashing on the workers, other than by means of xenophobia, scapegoating and divisions on the part of their politicians. Everything that the EFF, the economic freedom fighters, the Malemas, but also the mainstream political parties in this country are doing is, logical. And I think there is no alternative, from their point of view. And that is the reason that this growing right-wing populism, scapegoating, racism, xenophobia is so universal that is common to all bourgeois politicians in all countries across the world, because it flows from the logic of this system in this period of the crisis. And I think the alternatives that we're having in that sense have been summed up by Rosa Luxemburg. It's either socialism or barbarism. These are choices that are struggling before us in this historical moment. And I think, what are we saying concretely, comrade? We're talking about what movement the working class can be able to build, the issue of the Workers' Party. But the reality is, in the period where until now the bourgeois has been on the offensive, workers are losing jobs and they're just trying to survive, to keep their jobs and all these things and so on. The idea that they could move forward, and particularly, to pose the question of a political alternative, in that sense is very utopian. And this is the reason that for me, winning the strike of Clover would be an extremely significant step in the creation of the mass political alternative for the working class. Because what better way to lay foundation for that party other than by getting workers, changing the tides of the class struggle from a one-sided class war by the bourgeoisie into a mass working class resistance against the attacks, against the restructuring, factory closures, and the job losses. Obviously, a class that is beginning to win, a class that is beginning to gain confidence in its organizations, in its unity, in its struggle, is a class that is going to pose alternative to the way that society is run. And of course, at the most immediate level, the issue of political organization. So that's the reason, comrades. We've got to make sure that we support the struggle. And that's the reason that we appeal for support for Clover strike. Every cent that comrade can donate would make a huge difference. But at the present moment, it's not just a Clover strike itself. My union that has been playing an important role in the struggle itself is, I must confess, insolvent at the moment. There's barely, I'm not so sure that we are even going to be able to pay salaries at the end of the month, as I've discussed that with Dave. We are outside of SAFTU, and that is because of subscriptions. We're unable to pay for that. We are in areas of hundreds of thousands. We need to be able to have many more campaigns defending workers everywhere. Insofar as our political position is concerned, as leadership of GIWUSA, we consider ourselves in a class war against the capitalist class in this country and their policy. But obviously, for that, money is the sinew of war, as Lenin put it. We need the resources to be able to fight that. I mean, you think about what Malema is doing, right? He's going from restaurant to restaurant. What I was thinking to myself is that, I mean, in my region on the northern part of the country, Limpopo, that's what it's called. A lot of mines are closed there, right? MILCO operations are holding minerals in order to manipulate, the price of platinum group metals, in respect of which South African, all of that. Now, imagine if we could be organizing communities, visiting mines after mine, and demanding that those mines should be reopened, obviously, on the basis of renewable energies and all that, on the basis of a sustainable exploitation of those minerals, particularly in a situation wherein with this new hydrogen cells technology, they could actually prove, useful in a struggle for building a renewable source of energy and all of that. That if they could be beneficiated in those particular areas, we could create, jobs on the scale of tens of thousands, which would
Mabetli,
the poor and all of that.
I'm sorry to stop your very inspiring speech. We could listen to you for a long time. If you could just try and finish in a couple of minutes now, and then Roger can just.
If we were to be supported, it would be entirely possible, not only just to make statements, which we plan to release our statement denouncing xenophobic attacks, but actually, by making a visit along the lines that Malema is doing, but directed at big corporations in the mines, showing this is where tens of thousands of jobs that can overcome the curse of unemployment in regions like that, that can overcome the curse of poverty and all of that. And this is what we need to be organizing for. This is what we need to be fighting. And for that, we need the unity of the working class as the only social force that can present an alternative out of this quagmire. For that, comrade, every single cent that we can be able to get from you will be useful in strengthening our fighting capacity and making sure that we fight, we win Clover, and with Clover, we are able to begin to turn the tide, to win the struggles at SAB, to win the struggle at Petro SA, and of course to mobilizing communities where young people are suffering unemployment that is at the level of millions at the present moment, with a whole generation of young people whose livelihoods and whose lives and future have been wasted. On that note, comrades, again, thank you very much. I cannot overemphasize the significance and the inspiration of every small action and contribution to our struggle that you make. We are available to supporting other struggles. Do not hesitate to contact us, because we think the working class united will never be defeated. We think solidarity is two ways, and we must be giving as much solidarity as we are receiving it, if not more than that. Thank you very much, comrades.
Absolutely fantastic. Thank you. Right, well, that's the end of the discussion now. Massive thank you to them. I think you're one of the most inspiring speakers I've heard at one of our WIM meetings. And I think, we're so glad you brought your message and the message of workers along with your struggle. And it's particularly fantastic that so many South African workers have come this week. Please come again. But I'd like to thank you again. I'd like to thank everybody for your fantastic contributions. I think it's been an absolutely brilliant discussion. I think we had the Zenith, we had 52 people here at one point. Callistus is here. Can you be very quick? I'm really glad you've joined us.
Greeting, comrades.
Hi, Callistus. A couple of minutes because we have to finish, well, by 5 past anyway.
No, thanks. No, thanks. I really enjoyed, although I had to work there and there, but I enjoyed it. And I was thinking that I'll come early so that I have some input. There are things that I wanted to discuss further, especially the one that of the Workers' Party, because it's keep on arising here in South Africa. It was a debate in 2017 when we were celebrating 100 years worth of the Bolshevism, and then there's history beyond that. Also, I think on the issue of Clover, I hear what Comrade Sive is saying, but my analysis will be like the same like Rainbow Chicken, what happened at Rainbow, because currently here in Durban, I'm based in Durban, if you can locate Clover it's located outside industrial areas where people are not familiar with it. They are only familiar with the products of Clover when they see it on the shops. But where it's being manufactured, they don't know its party. I cannot deal with other issues because of time, because I came late, but I enjoyed. Maybe next time I'll speak more on the issues, because South African workers are like we are caught in a spider web. We can't move, we can't do anything. There's fatigue also around that. That's all what I can say for now. Thanks, comrades.
Oh, thanks, Callistus. That's brilliant. Yeah, I think we need to hear about that at greater length. But thank you for being brief tonight, and I'm really glad you got in the end. Finally, Roger.
Well, comrades, I think it's been yet another memorable and inspirational meeting of WIN. I think this struggle, it's really brought home to all of us how important it is that this struggle is won. We've had comrades here from 3 continents. We have we learn from each other's experience. We've got the embodied, concentrated experience of decades of struggle contained among the comrades here. We absolutely need, and you really appeal to the comrades not only to keep in touch with us through this in the course of this strike, the duration of the strike, but to contribute the amazing ideas and revolutionary spirit that you've shown. Please, we need that in future, because we all learn from one another, and we're discussing every week with comrades involved in struggles in every country on every continent. And so we really do welcome you. I would say particularly that there's a number of comrades here who are not on our mailing list. So please, through whatever channels you got the link to this meeting, can you please make sure that you pass on your email addresses so we can add you to the mailing list. We have well over 300 comrades on our mailing list of comrades in something like 20 or 25 countries. So please, comrades, we all need to learn from one another and to get inspiration from one another. I'd also appeal to all the comrades, take down the details of the bank accounts for the union and give your donations, both your donations to the workers involved in this crucial struggle, but also to help to keep the union going. You have the details are all on the in the chat record.